Sonia are in the beginning part of the meeting, so
I
we should
figured
be
so.
okay.
Perfect, thank
But
you.
thank you. And then Brenna, if you want to just let me know when you're ready for the recording.
We are live streaming now. You go ahead.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'm going to call the NDPHIT Board of Trustees meeting to order. Brenna, you'd be able to take roll via just online on what we need to do, but you can confirm we have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So first order of the agenda is our consent agenda, and I would need a motion to approve the minutes of our meeting on, let me grab the date, on September 18th. You've had an opportunity to review those.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those not in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, motion passes. The second part of the agenda is the operational update. And one of the first things on the agenda there is the health committee. And we as a board had discussed, there's issues and different things that may arise, that it would be nice to have a subcommittee to be able to discuss and maybe bring forward recommendations to the board of directors. I've been working with Brenna and the SEEK team to put together or find a couple of people that are outside of our board, as well as SEEK and Brown to join the committee, and happy to report that we do have our final member on the committee. So we currently have 3 board members that are there, which is myself, Mike, as well as Desi, and then 2 outside of our board, Shannon Davis with Stutzman County and Billy Joe Peterson with Hazen Public Schools. And then we'd also have Randy and John, either of them, from Brown, as well as Angie and Brenna. And so now that we have a full committee ready to go to be able to meet, what we're really looking at from the board is direction to task this committee on things that we would like them to review. Couple of suggestions that I was thinking for discussion. We ran into a situation recently with having a entity looking to leave the NDPHIT pool, and looking at what the penalty is for leaving. There's really no teeth in the agreement to hold them to a standard of maybe a fiscal responsibility, or even giving that annual notice. There's no penalty if they decide not to follow any of that. So that might be something that the committee could take a look at, is what is our out clause, regulations, guidelines, I guess, to be able to look at that. Another thing that I was thinking about was looking at the exploring strategies on risk pool management for the NDPHIT pool. What are some things that we could be doing as far as maybe standardizing some of our plan designs and those kinds of things? But really would like to also hear from other board members on some of the things that you would like to see this subcommittee tackle, as far as tasks that we could bring forward to the board for consideration. Anybody have any suggestions, or what do you think of the 2 that kind of brought forward just for discussion purposes? Is that something that you'd like us to maybe even just start off looking at?
Well, I think from my standpoint, I came on after you were already a year into this, so I wasn't even aware of what some of the stipulations and requirements are in place. And I'm thinking right away, like a vested in your retirement plan, you have to be here for 3-4 years, depending on your plan, before you get 100% vested. I don't know how that works, but I would recommend that we are consistent with what NDPHIT does, because we all work with these different organizations and have consistency. So I don't want to have one organization being way different than NDPHIT. If we can kind of match it to where it makes it fair for our area, it kind of makes it cleaner and simpler. But I agree.
Sure, that's definitely something we can look at, and I think it's helpful too to have outside entities, although there's not a park on it, but we have schools, we have counties, as well as Seek and Brown and Brown to help guide us in what is kind of standard protocol in some of these areas as well. But right now, our out clause, particularly with entities leaving our trust, there's not a lot of teeth, if you will, if they decide to leave. So I think that's important for us to be able to put those parameters in place and have a little bit stronger guideline from that standpoint.
This is Sonia too. I do think customer relations is very critical. Just from being like chosen to be a mentor to business managers in the state of North Dakota, from what I'm hearing, I'm hearing good things and bad things with NDPHIT. And I just think that if we kind of focus a little bit on customer relations and educational pieces, even if it's just follow up a couple times a year with each group. I know that sounds like a lot. I don't know what our budget allows, if it would be another hire or what it would be, but I do think that customer relations, as we grow, it could become a critical piece on just all aspects of existing and possibly new groups. I just think that's important.
No, I totally agree, Sonia. Particularly, even though when we say new groups come on, when you really think about NDPHIT hasn't been here that long, so I still feel we're all kind of new, and being able to understand all the ins and outs and what needs to be done and being able to provide that support. I will say, since Seek has brought on Angie on the team to have a dedicated customer service rep to work with our member groups, I think that's helped tremendously. But there's always, areas for improvement and things that we can do to strengthen our customer relations.
Yes, I agree. I think Angie does a great job with day-to-day operations and answering questions. She's been a huge asset to this group. I didn't mean it that, I guess mine was like the proactive, like I can't imagine how busy she is just on what she's doing. It would be more of a proactive, just reaching out to them when they're not asking questions, because maybe they're not confident that their question is even a good question, or they're just, I feel like people these days just tend to be negative and not find out the facts before they start, I don't know what you want to say, complaining, I guess, but that's what I meant. So yes, good job, Angie. And yeah, mine would be on the proactive side of things.
No, I think that's a great point. We were initially thinking monthly to meet, but I guess I know with the legislative session, I'm not sure how involved everyone is on our committee with that. Unfortunately, I'm greatly involved in that piece of it, so we'll have to maybe maneuver that a little bit during the next couple of months, but I really would like to try to get something on the schedule sooner than later, to at least be able to tackle one or two of these areas, to be able to bring back to the boards for some additional discussion and maybe guidance, and making sure we're going the right direction and on what we'd like to do as a trust. So any other comments in regards to where they would like to see the committee look at different areas for the trust? Okay. With that, section B on our agenda is our operational budget. This is something that does need board action. And Brenna, I believe, did you put this together for us, correct?
Yes, it was in your packet. And these are just the costs that are not in the underwriting part of NDPHIT. It is exactly the same as last year's approved budget. We were slightly under, with kind of a few more bills still yet to come in this year. So we just kept it the same. I don't know if you have any questions.
One question I did have, Brenna, I know we've dealt with some of our legal areas as far as reviewing different, not so much agreements, but working with Blue Cross Blue Shield and getting some opinions in regards to certain things. Is that enough to be able to cover?
So I mean, it's broken out into different legal, general counsel and the trust compliance. I would say our general counsel does not take a lot of questions from us. They're more like contract related, and that is nowhere near that 10,000, which gives us a little wiggle room for when the compliance things, those attorneys are quite a bit more expensive and take more time. So I left it in those buckets. I could adjust it to be more like 15 and 5 or 17, you know what I mean? But all in all, that has been plenty each year as
Okay.
far as total legal expenses.
I just wanted to make sure we had enough in the budget. And again, if it's a bucket of legal with sub buckets, as long as I think we can stay within the overall budget of what's being listed there under legal, I think we should be okay.
Yes, so far it's been plenty.
Do any board members have any comments or questions in regards to the operational budget?
Just a clarification. So when I was reading the actual agreement between NDPHIT and SEEK, item 10 talks about liability insurance and coverage for its officers and employees. And I look at your agreement. Is that what's specified under insurance for, what was the number again? No.
Yeah, it says fidelity bond. Those
Yep.
all the insurance is within that. Yes.
Okay.
That
And those coverages, I just want to make sure that's what that meant.
And then just a reminder, the trust board educational forums, that's training for us as board members. And I think Steve gave us an update on our last board meeting in regards to that. So just know that that's available. I think they have a couple of trainings per year. So just keep that in your back pocket if you haven't had an opportunity to take in one of those trainings as well. Okay, any other questions in regards to the operational budget or comments in that regard? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2025 NDPHIT operational budget.
It's Chris, I'll move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Sonia, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those not in favor of approving the budget, please signify by saying aye. Motion is approved. So great segue into your question, Cole, in regards to the SEEK agreement. Our current agreement is on an annual basis. It will be expiring at the end of this month. And so I believe, Brenna, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there were any changes to this agreement. One question I did have on the table under subsection 6 under the commission schedule, I noticed the MetLife worksite, the first year has a much higher percentage in commission than the subsequent annual payouts. Can you share why there's a difference in that section?
Well, that was just this is the same agreement changed, not changed. So I could have taken that out because that's obviously we're not in the first year of the trust anymore. I believe, Randy, we just put that in to get things moving with the MetLife products, and since then.
That's the stand. That's the way voluntary products work. That's how they pay. They pay.
Okay.
It's like a standard approach to how compensation is made. There is a higher amount, and then it goes down significantly, and it goes in some cases very low. But that's because there's usually front end expenses that have to be paid for if you're using third party vendors, like we do. We have to pay; those get paid for, and in order for them to even be interested, they won't work unless they get paid that higher amount to cover their fixed cost on the front end.
And Jenny, I have a question on that contract. So I know when you and I and Mike had worked about trying to figure out a way to do 2 or 3 year contracts or a 2-year with a renewal for a third. This is only a 1-year contract. So that's my first question. And then my second question is, when it shows commissions, first year payout, why do we have subsequent annual payouts if we're only doing 1 year?
So those actually come from MetLife. NDPHIT only pays us the $3 ahead.
Correct.
Yes.
But,
Sorry, I just want to make sure that was known.
no, I understood the $3 one, but we talked about in our subcommittee, and it's been a few months, Jenny, but
Mhm.
we wanted to do a 2-year with a third-year renewal so that because we went a year with not having a contract. And then we wanted to get that up and running. So we were talking about trying to do a long-term commitment to NDPHIT's ability to have a third-party vendor more than just annually.
Yep, and Cole, I think when we initially discussed that, there was going to be transition in leadership with Seek. And I think that when we had that discussion, Kyle had stated something about do it for a year and then moving forward with new leadership if we wanted to continue doing an extended contract. I think that's what we discussed. Is there any opposition, Brenna, from your organization if we would look to extend this as more of a 2-year with a 1-year renewal? So we're not having, I see that there's an automatic renewal every year. But I tend to agree with Cole from the standpoint of it would be nice to have that security, if you will. You guys have done a phenomenal job being able to administer our program and move forward with that. How does the other board members feel if Seek is willing to do a longer term agreement? So Brenna, are you guys willing to do a longer term agreement? Maybe we should get that answered first.
I think so. John, my boss, is on as well. He is the new leadership of Seek, which I do believe, Jenny, that when we discussed it, Kyle maybe maybe he was public in his retirement then. I can't remember, but yeah, I don't think they would oppose it if that's what you want me to bring back to my board.
So I wouldn't be in opposition either. I mean, looking at it and understanding it a little bit, only being in the position for the short time I have been, but seeing the operation of it, I don't know that there'd be much concerns for us committing to that. And Brenna and I can bring that to the board. I think we have board meeting in January, Brenna. I think
so. We can reach out.
Yep.
How is the other board members feeling about doing an extended contract with Seek rather than an annual?
Do we want to do a annual for this time since it's done, and then after that do a multi-year?
When did you say your board is meeting, Brenna?
I don't think it's until after the new year.
Okay. Kevin, so you're stating that if we do it for this year for the single year, and then when we're up for renewal at the end of 25, extend that to a 2 or 3 year contract with another option or addendum to renew for another 1 or 2 year period?
it doesn't look like we meet till February 5th, our
Okay.
governing board.
And I don't think it would be appropriate to continue, I don't know, unless the other board members feel differently. I think it's important to have an agreement in place with Seek so we can continue to move forward with the operational side of things, and then be able to look at updating the terms of the agreement for the following years.
And I can support Kevin's recommendation. I think that's a motion and I can second it because I just want to ask the question as to what changed. I hadn't heard when we were talking 2+1. So if Kevin wants to make that motion, I will second it for a 1-year agreement.
Kevin, yep, Kevin's got a thumbs up. That's his motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those not in favor of approving the Seek agreement signify by saying aye. Motion's carried. Next is our ENI, our employee assistance renewal rate. There's no increase in their agreement for the upcoming year. That was an annual, I believe, contract, and so we just need to do an approval for the rate renewals for the ENI contract. Is that correct, Brenna?
Yeah, I believe it's 79,000 flat fee for all employees in the trust.
And there's no increase in that fee. That's the same as it was in 24 as well.
Correct.
I don't know if we have any numbers from ENI in regards to I mean, not specifics, but just number of employees that are utilizing the program. Have we received anything from them in that regard?
Angie, do you know any of that or Steph?
It would be helpful
I-
to know, considering that we just started a contract with them, how much it's being utilized.
I haven't received the utilization reports, but we do have a meeting every so often. So that's one of the things that I asked, but I can reach out to Jordan and get that information. And then I don't know if you guys want me to distribute it to the board off meeting, just like so you guys know, or if you want us to bring it to the next board meeting. And maybe Randy or Steph has utilization reports. I just haven't seen anything. So
I don't have any utilization reports. It usually takes them quite some time to pull them together. So yes, by the next board meeting, we could definitely present that for the 2024 calendar year.
I think that would be important to see because, you know, E&I is a newer vendor that we've partnered with. I think it would be good to see what type of utilization has been, you know, completed throughout the year with our members and determine if we're getting, you know, a good value for what we're spending on the contract. Do you know, is the rate renewal would be starting as of January 1? Is that correct? Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I do think it's important to have an employee assistance program for employees, and I do know that I know there's some of our entities, I believe, use different employee assistance program, but for the majority, I think everyone is on the E&I program. Does anybody have any concerns with renewing the rates for the employee assistance program in 2025? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the EAP renewal rates with E&I for 2025.
I'll move.
Thank you, Keith. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? The only thing that I would add, Angie, is when you do meet with them, do request that the board has asked to see, you know, some type of statistics. It doesn't need to be specific by entities or anything like that, but we would like to see how the program has been utilized. I think that's important.
yeah,
Great.
absolutely. I can reach out, outside of but that's good to say that the board did. I do know personally, just from what I'm not personally, but what I'm hearing from the groups and people requesting information and feedback I've gotten, there has been quite a bit. It's just, it would be good to get the numbers and what are people utilizing it for is one of the things we've talked about too. So to see what the focus is.
So I can tell you that we have seen information through the third quarter, and we are seeing a 5% increase in that utilization. The current time frame and the previous time frame, well, it's not a 5% increase. I apologize. It's about the same. There's a 5% utilization, and that's pretty common for EAPs because you're not going to get 100% utilization because only those who actually need it will utilize it. So for the previous time frame in 2023, they showed a unique member utilization of 5.03%, and for the current time frame, it's 5.23%. So we've seen just a slight uptick, but that's pretty common for EAPs.
Well, I think it's also important. I think when we initially moved forward with E&I to be our supporter for the employee assistance program, it's so much more than just personal assistance and help. I mean, there's things that if you're a supervisor or work-related types of things, and again, when we talk about proactive communication, like Sonia had stated, you know, there might be some areas where not only is it for employees' benefit, but also for the employer's benefit as well. So maybe working with them, Angie, again, when you visit with them, seeing if there's some additional, I know they do webinars on a pretty regular basis for supervisors and the like as well. But if you're not able to attend those webinars, maybe having some additional information to share with employers, I think would be important. Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve the rates for 2025. All those not in favor of approving rates, please signify by saying aye. Okay, motion has carried. Angie, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say they're going through some restructuring and they've had some change in staffing. And so they're looking at having some new opportunities available too. And that was one of the things that we talked about also is being proactive and advertising and communicating and some of those kinds of things too. So it's in the works too. So
okay. Great. Perfect. And then next on the agenda is Thriver wellness renewal rates for 2025. I will say that I feel within the last year, I think Thriver's really stepped up in trying to provide or be at least more seen as far as what they offer in wellness benefits. I think the wellness screenings that happened around the state, both in schools and non-school entities, I think was a really great step forward. And being able to work with health coaches and having employees give some options and opportunities to be able to help with their health and wellness, I think was a really great step in the right direction. Did anybody else have any other comments or concerns in regards to Thriver? And I believe their wellness rates are going to be the same for 2025 as well. They held their rates steady with 2024 rates. So there is no increase. If no one,
well, the one comment I guess I'd have with Thriver on the wellness screenings, they were scaled back this year compared to the first year. I don't know if that was a purposeful thing or that decision of which, they didn't do any of the blood screenings or anything. It was just the Evolve machine. Do we know, is that a long-term thing or why that was scaled back? It wasn't quite as robust the second year as the first year.
So Steve, I can speak to that. In fact, I just had a call with Mike earlier today, and that is one thing. I showed him a report that we were able to capture with that shows for a particular school where they did both the blood profile as well as the body composition tied to the claims file. And it was very impactful information. And so we decided collectively that we should support doing the blood profile combined with body composition, because if and going forward, just so everybody knows, Blue Cross is actually changing their incentive they've changed the Healthy Blue program that you have to do it with a actual clinical provider to bill a procedure or a preventative care visit. And because of that as well, it's going to be much more helpful for if it's a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner or an MD that's doing that evaluation of the results to have the blood profile as well as body composition. So that's going to be an area that we're going to make as an extended emphasis in conjunction with Thriver and their screening events this next year. And just so you know, the way that they changed the program, Blue Cross will now pay the incentive of $150 to the members when they do that process that I just described. We've been working on this, and Angie and Stephanie and Brenna and team know it's been probably about 2 months since Blue Cross announced that change. So we've been working out a new process for it. And that will be forthcoming. We just had a call earlier, I think it was this week or last week, Angie, that with Blue Cross essentially going to do an announcement of the rollout of the updated program. And that's why I was visiting with Mike today, just so that he and I are aligned on those different components and the data points that we think are going to be helpful for the trust, for feedback, as well as those providers meeting with the members on their individual feedback. So hopefully that will address that question that you had, Steve.
Thank you.
So Randy, do you know over the last 2 years, have they been able to have a touch point with every one of the members within the NDPHIT trust, or are they still working on trying to get a touch point on each member
Well, yeah,
organization?
so not every employer group for sure. I think they focused on the larger groups first, and secondly, there's actually a limited budget that we get as kind of that budget allocation from Blue Cross, and if trust decides that they want to spend more than what's allocated, then they'll have to just we can bring that forward as maybe something that based on the actual utilization that occurs after we roll out the new program. But last year, I think they did just under 1,000 total screens, and that includes RD visits. Actual screens, it was about 800, if I remember correctly, and then they had several registered dietitian follow-up visits to that too.
So do you know what their goals are, I guess, for 2025 in regards to what that means like?
The limitation that we have right now is just making sure that we get it communicated really well with this new program that Blue Cross has. We would have started, and I think Angie would concur, we'd have probably started out sooner for this announcement, but because they changed the program just 2 months ago and kind of threw us a curveball in terms of how we can get the incentive structure, it's made it a little bit of a challenge for us to do a quicker rollout. But I know there's a lot of interest and effort to make sure it gets rolled out as effectively as we can and as timely, but not overly fast so we have bad experiences. We don't want the members or the groups to have a bad experience with it. So,
okay. And Blue Cross is definitely on board with funding them to be doing these wellness screenings again.
Yeah, they already provided. We received another 50,000 that Brenna shows. I think it's on the financials, so that you'll see. But we've asked for another 50,000, so hopefully we'll have $100,000 budget for the screenings again this next year.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions in regards to the Thriver program or the wellness renewal rates? Again, I believe they are holding they're holding the same as they were in 2024. If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the renewal rates for 2025 for Thriver.
I would make that motion.
No, Kevin, second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those not in favor of approving the renewal rates for Thriver signify by saying aye. Okay, motion is carried. And then the Taylor Walker analysis, if you all recall, we did approve to move forward to have the financial and reserve analysis completed. It had been 3 years since that's been done. This also helps us understand how much we need to have in reserves, our IBNR, and I believe that has now been completed. Randy, I think, were you going to kind of give us an overview of what we found out in regards to the analysis that was completed by them?
Can you see my screen?
Yes. We are having, I don't know if anybody else is having a little bit of you sound a little muffled to me, but maybe that's just my system. I'm not sure.
I'm on my laptop. I hope that is causing a problem.
Oh, that's better.
Is that better? Okay.
Much, yes.
Okay, let me if I can get to a slideshow here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Gotta make sure I can see okay. It went to it. Okay, there we are. So this is just a little background. We asked the actuarial firm, Taylor and Walker. They did a study, I think it's been almost 3 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago, that they did a study for a couple things. One, we looked at IBNR. We also looked at fund balance and stop loss. So we asked them to do a similar, just so we can have some context for the data that we shared with them on all the claims. and make sure that we have the proper fund balance. I think some of this has to do with the idea that whenever we get questions about, can we return a deposit? One of the key things is making sure that we have adequate reserves that not only meets the statutory requirements, but actuarial requirements to keep the plan in the best financial position. So using an outside actuary to validate and make recommendations, we feel is prudent. So we did that. We went and they responded and gave us the study. So these were the IBNR estimate analysis that they did. So they indicated that there's an established number that they defined, which is this 3.252856 number. That's what they consider to be kind of the target. However, they also recommended that there be what they call an adverse deviation calculation for as a surplus, potentially just because of variation that can happen within this size of a trust. The larger the trust becomes in terms of its financial payment system and its claims, the more that this just having a deviation factor is important. So they said anywhere from a 5 to 10% deviation should be established. I think it's ID Bailey that you use, Brenna, that calculated the IBNR reserve, or it was a different actuary, if I remember correctly.
It's a different actuary out of Minneapolis, but yeah.
Yeah. So that actuary came up with a number of 3.5 million as our IBNR, which is listed on the financial statements that you'll see, or if you've already read it. So what Taylor and Walker recommended was the 3.252, but however, if you use the deviation, 3.5 million is within their recommended deviation, which it would be a plus 7.06. So we feel that is meeting the number, and I'm sure that the outside actuary that we use for the IBNR will probably adjust that again next year or for next year. So that's a go forward number. So again, the more cash we have, the more we grow in premium, that number will always change. And just again, as a reference, IBNR stands for incurred but not reported claim liability, which is the number established that if you ever had to terminate a plan, it's what they call the tail liability of claims. So even though you stopped a plan, you need to continue to pay claims just because of the timing of when a claim is incurred for service to when it gets paid by a carrier. So the next study component had to do with the plan reserves. So the section that deals with plan reserves is the owner's equity on the financial statement. And as of this last financial statement, you'll see there's a number of $7.6 million in the membership equity, for which $4,037,000 came from the deposits, and the remainder came from essentially a surplus over time over the last few years in underwriting profits. It's recommended to have 2 to 3 months of claims and expenses in a reserve by the actuary. So where are we at today? If you'll follow this down here, we have approximately 2.04 of claims on hand based on this $7.6 million. And that is a forecast for the 24-25 year. So that's the October pool and the January pool of 3,879 members. This is our current composite of premium. That stands for per employee per month. And then if we were to forecast an increase into that number into the next year at 6.9%, what do we need to, there's two components that we're looking at here. One is that we already add 1% to the premium of our renewals that we currently do. And the other is what we would consider an underwriting gain. We have been averaging since the trust started about a 98% loss ratio, which means that we have about a 2% underwriting gain over that time period. So if we continue to do a 1% increase to the premium and we have a 1% underwriting gain, then this table allows you to see what would occur from here until 2030. So what does this mean? This portion here, again, is premium. So if you were to take our cash divided by our claims plus fixed expenses, that's 1.69 months. And then it's 2.04 of actual claims to pay for medical and pharmacy. What is the recommendation? 2 to 3 months. So if we continue to do what we're doing in that these two factors, a 1% increase to the renewal and a 1% underwriting gain, then effectively what will happen is by the year 2030, we will have 2.26 months of premium on hand and 2.74 of claims, which would be within the recommended range, kind of at the top tier, if you would, of the range of 2 to 3%. That would give us a projected owner's equity of $16,610,000. This analysis does not include, though, just so you know, anything dealing with the interest earned from the CDs. We've kept that separate because that's not typically part of an underwriting formula. Now, in time, if the board wants to include interest earned into our cash on hand for this analysis, then we can certainly do that. But to be conservative, we kept it within kind of the standard framework of how you look at underwriting. Is there any questions on this portion? It's a little bit, a lot of moving pieces to it, but I wanted to make sure that we covered this in detail.
Randy, I think one question that kind of came to mind for me was when we talked about, of course, do we get our deposits back? And we know that answer is no, because we need to keep that as a reserve piece. But would we be looking at something maybe in the future when you're looking at January of 2030 and those numbers being within the ratio of what we need to have for reserves? Is that maybe a time to talk about like a conferment of benefits back to the members or something along those lines?
Yeah,
Okay.
It would be. In fact, you could even allocate a separate line item for your interest earned, because if we add that to that, like this year, I think we've already earned $330,000 in interest. In the prior year, there was another probably 200,000. So that's when it gets to maybe this, say, between the 2028 through the 2030 year, and you add the interest into it, then and you can have it all confirmed by the actuary that's adequate to do what, like a premium holiday.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you would look at that for sure.
Okay. I mean, that's not something we'd probably want to jump into, but I think if we have 3-4 years of stable growth and we're staying within those ranges, that might be something to explore for the trust.
And another thing to keep in mind too, is one of our roles and responsibility is to actually help the plan perform better than even a 99% loss ratio. In other words, our objective and initiative is to look at every potential opportunity that we can operate in this, a 96 to 98% loss ratio. If that occurred and we looked at it every year, that could be another 1 to 3% surplus in a given year. So you could accelerate that cash need or that cash calculation formula.
Did they have any recommendations considering, we did this about 3 years ago and looking at how aggressively, I would say, our trust has grown with membership and the like? Did they feel that this was still appropriate to be doing it every 3 years, or is there a price point, if you will?
We should use I talked to Scott about that. He said, this is the range, but you should look at this every year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do the analysis, but we should look at what our fund balance calculation by cash on hand and premium formulation is. And if we do that, which we will, basically, I think this time of year, every year, I can do this update on this to give us the board exactly where we're at. So that allows us to see a point in time, but also the forecast.
Does anybody have any questions in regards to the analysis? It's good to see that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, and one other comment Scott made, he says, you're actually accelerating beyond what we projected under our initial analysis. So he thinks that we are performing better than what we did the first, or when they last looked at it, just so you know that.
Great. Anyone have any questions or comments in regards to that? Okay, well, thanks for the update on that, Randy. Appreciate it. And again, like I said, I'm glad to see we're in the ballpark and we're doing all of the things correctly to make sure that we're having an ample reserve for our trust. So that's great.
And there was only one other part that we asked him to do, and that was the stop loss, to make sure it was in the right number. And I won't go through every one of these line items, but this is kind of their assessment of what they came up with. The bottom line to all this, and it's a busy slide, but our stop loss, this threshold, so everybody just maybe just for reference, any one individual who has a claim over $300,000, then the Blue Cross pays for it. And just so you'll know this, if you don't know this already, we just in the summer, you probably heard it on the news, there was an individual that got burned in a fire. They passed away. That person happened to be on our plan. The gross amount of that claimant was $11.5 million.
Ooh.
The plan, Blue Cross ended up paying $8.5 million of it. Of course, it hit our stop loss, so that our exposure on it's 300,000. Year to date, of all the entire trust, we only had 4 individuals that hit that 300,000. So this would be our 5th one. But of course, that skews that it's for the October pool. So staying within still the 300,000 is Scott said that is the appropriate number, given the size of our trust and that we have 2 pools. So that was confirmation. And just so everybody understands typically how stop loss works. So Blue Cross, even though they had to pay, 8.5 million, and we had to pay 300,000 of that. So their net exposure was 8.2 million. What most carriers do, and Blue Cross is not unlike anybody else, and that means they would go out and layer that risk out to other stop or reinsurance carriers. I don't know specifically how they're structured, but most other entities that do stop loss, they may only take, say, a layer of $2 million on a claimant, and then they'll cede that additional risk to another reinsurer. And maybe that next reinsurer may take 2 million. So the way that the market works is when you have these massive in my entire career, I've never seen a claim. In fact, I don't think anybody at Brown & Brown that I know of has seen a claimant to be $8.5 million. So this is such an unusual situation, and it's really sad, obviously, because it affects lots of individuals in terms of their family member. But the bottom line is that they layer those risks up. What we don't know at this point, and what we're looking for as it comes up for our renewal for the October pool, is what the allocation of that exposure would be to our loss ratio for calculating our premium increase on the stop loss. Normally there's usually outlier, what we call an outlier threshold, and that could be anywhere from a 30 to a 50% increase in a given year. But we've actually so far had a very positive loss ratio for, our entire pool, other than that one claimant. So we will be monitoring this really closely, and working with Blue Cross to ensure that we get a fair, renewal. Because again, they're not taking entirely that exposure. They layered it off. So it's just going to be a matter of negotiation and ensuring that they're using, an appropriate calculation to the structure of our ongoing risk that we'll have, because it's a one and done. In other words, sometimes what we describe it as, it's not like an ongoing claimant. So, Cole, you had a question.
Yeah, so if you can go back a slide, I just had a quick question. I don't want to delay it any longer, but
Yeah.
you can go back one slide.
Yep.
So you want to be at 16 million by 2030. Understand all that. That doesn't take into consideration any new people coming onto the plan, correct?
It does. Well, not any new people. Yeah. So it's holding constant this, but an increase to the premium over that time period.
Correct, but it doesn't show employee membership increasing.
Yeah, and that's why we have to look at it every year, because that could be
Right.
a variable in the analysis. That's
So
good
if
to
we
know.
were to take on new members in the next 5 years, obviously that will accelerate it even quicker. But the question would be
It
the
does.
average losses are going to increase potentially too, which goes back to, I think we talked a couple of months or a couple of board meetings ago about, is there a number that we want to cap this at to get to where that threshold is? And then with everybody coming in, so the existing members are getting the 1% increases in the annual renewals, but the people coming in are going to come in at whatever that number is. So do new people have to come in at a higher rate to make up for that or not?
Actually, what we do, it's a good question. It's a really good question. What we do, Cole, is anybody new coming in, we actually make sure that they have a better than average historical loss ratio. So we try to get them no greater than a 90% loss ratio. So they're actually contributing in a more positive way than the existing pool. But very good question.
And Randy, when you're doing
Yep.
the negotiations with Blue Cross Blue Shield in regards to this catastrophic claim, do they have a time frame on, I just would hate for us to be blindsided in the October
Yeah.
pool in September to find out that rates are going to be skyrocketing because of this.
Well, our team has been in conversation with them over the last, I mean, we're getting data every day trying to keep, we want to be way ahead of this, to your point. In other words, we want to understand, first of all, making sure the settlement is done correctly in terms of the claims, because that's another question that we have is, what's the audit process? As well as what's their formulation of the payment model that they actually use to pay the claim? Those are questions that we're still gathering information on. But most importantly is how they're going to position this in our renewal structure. And we hope to have this as part of our very next renewal cycle discussion that we have with them when we do the, I think we do the, well, it's going to happen in February and March. That's actually the time frame that we'll have this discussion with them.
One other question I had, and I don't know if there's any similarities to this or not, but you know how when you have a workers' comp claim, it's that maybe a catastrophic claim is over a 3-year history of the claim loss is in your average, and then it drops off. Is that similar to how this works for medical, or is it completely different?
Yeah, you don't have any tail liability for carryover in this situation, because literally it was a one event. They basically book the entire loss at a point in time.
Okay.
So it's not a carry forward loss. If they were, say, on a pharmacy or something like that, then that could be an ongoing. But in this case, it's literally at the, for that particular exposure.
Does anyone else have any questions for Randy on the Taylor Walker analysis? Okay, do you want to just move right into the Digby Health data
Yep.
reporting information? That'd be great.
Yeah, I've got it. Yep. So we've had a kind of a year-to-date report with Digby a few weeks ago. So this will be the summary of that I'll be sharing with you here. So where are we at in terms of since we made the change from the GLP-1 program, which was July 1st. Mike in our office, he tracks this. He gets a report from Blue Cross, so we're able to see what our plan expenses are in each of these categories. So if you remember, we made the non-diabetic class of GLP-1s subject to a 50% sanction and not applicable to the out-of-pocket max. So that was one of the changes. And then the diabetic class, they were changed to subject to a copay as a brand formulary drug. So this was our plan expense just in the month of June prior to the change, $294,000 for just those GLP-1 class of drugs. And you could see what's occurred steadily since then in terms of a cost reduction. So in those 4 months, it's say $531,000, just pure cost savings. We feel that there are some other factors that we're not maybe seeing the full savings that could be had or potentially be there into next year. One of them is some of these members that are in these categories have already satisfied their entire out-of-pocket. So they have no reason to change because it's 100% coverage. That would be more in the diabetic class, okay? The manufacturers of these drugs, they provide a coupon subsidy. So if you go in and get these, you'll hear it advertised, you know, Mounjaro or Wegovy or Ozempic, and they'll say, hey, if you're going to be on these, we'll give you a coupon every month that you can go in and get them filled. So that buys down the exposure for the member. But those usually only have a year life cycle when they start a program. So hopefully we'll get a better impact in the future on that. For those who've already satisfied their out-of-pocket max, they have to reset in January. So they'll fill it in January. So they may get some ideas to think about, you know, not wanting to have that exposure. The other thing, the diabetic members are still being pre-authorized by Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're not being pre-authorized by Digby. So Digby pre-authorizes the non-diabetic class. And obviously that's where we've seen the biggest savings is in the non-diabetic class. That was kind of a non-negotiable, you know, by Blue Cross. So we'll see where, you know, that we'll have to visit that discussion with them later on. Providing prescriber, you know, essentially that could be the provider who says, I just want you to use the manufacturer. Even though it's going to cost you more money, that's where they're sending them to. That could be a case. So when we factor in the Digby cost and the Medalis cost for the pharmacy services that have been provided to, I want to say there's 57 individuals that are using the pharmacy through Medalis. And so the 4-month net savings to the plan is $307,000. Now, most of the Digby cost, just so you know, is, I think, and Brenna, you can correct me, but I think a lot of this is somewhat annualized. So that's not an expense we're going to see, you know, month after month or even quarter after quarter, that they charge so much upfront to onboard them and then so much a quarter, and then it's paid for by the year or for the year. So that's effectively where that's at. And then Digby kind of gave their own summary analysis. And I'm not going to go through every one of these slides. You can have it as a follow-up and read all the detail if you'd like. But their utilization benchmark that they wanted to get to was 5%. And year to date, they're at 4%. So they felt that was good. They're getting good engagement. And 65 individuals signed up for food as a medicine program. In other words, they're not necessarily on GLP-1 medications, but they feel that the Digby program can help them. And 75% of those individuals are losing weight, and 20% are at or above 5% weight loss already since, I'm not sure of the time frame, but program just started in July.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The last slide. So when
Sure.
they do prescriptions, are they like 6-month prescriptions or like 1 month or?
These are 1 month right here.
Okay.
For Medalis, that's 90 days. So this is a
Okay.
1 month cost here, and this is a 90-day, however many people are involved in the 90-day program here.
Okay. I just didn't know if they're like doing 6-month prescriptions, so we're gonna see a increase in 6 months from now or something, but
Yeah, this is again, I don't have them broken. This one's not broken down by month. But when they do an order through Medalis, it's a 90-day supply versus this truly is only a 1 month. Pre-authorization, 44% went through pre-auth, or 44 members, I should say. 72% are losing weight, and our 50% are above 5% of weight loss. And then they had 6 individuals who were actually not approved for GLP. And they have several other metrics. Again, I'm not going to necessarily go through all these, but there was one at the very end where they kind of summarized their forecast. This is their 12-month savings forecast. The members applying for pre-authorization were 44 approved, 38 members denied 6. I think actually this is real data. GLP-1 members who decided to use the food as the medicine, they shared that before, and that's 65. Moved from branded drugs, the manufacturer, to Medalis, they had 24. Now you got to remember there's more on the Medalis because we grandfathered those individuals who were already on it, who were not new to it. So if you're new, you had to pre-authorize after July 1st. But you had several that moved over prior to that. Estimated annual pre-auth avoided, the GLP-1 spend. So it's 6 plus or 65, which are these numbers up here. So it's about 710,000. Compounded savings. Before we shared with them our numbers of claims, because they didn't have this when they originally came up with this report, they had forecasted 844,000. The actual forecast for the compounded savings is $1.2 million. The Digby spend forecast is 217,000. So the 12-month savings that they are forecasting originally was 854,000. Or if you adjust it for the real compound savings, assuming all those compound individuals stay on it, and now if they come off of it's even more of a savings, but if they continue throughout a year, it's about $1.9 million of savings to the trust. So their ROI factor, instead of 3.9, it's actually 8.75. So the Digby program feedback has been positive, but interested in anybody of the board members who've gotten any feedback of either programs.
I was just curious, like how many members are participating in this? Because I'm assuming it's going to continue to grow with the popularity, similar with the EAP with the ENI. Just curious how many people are participating in that.
Well, you're talking about maybe those just in the Digby and or Medalis compound option.
Right, either one or combined.
Yeah, well, I don't have, all we have are these numbers that they shared as kind of the breakdown. So we do know that, again, there's 57 total GLP-1 users using the compound, and then they have other individuals who are involved in their program that they've listed here. But we will get a year-end report that we'll have for January to share. So we'll have a July through December 31st report that that we can probably, we'll ask for that specific question though, Cole. We'll get the answer to that.
Randy, I have 188 people
Oh, there you go.
in
Okay.
my count.
That's on the Digby program overall,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
one program or another. I don't know. I just know 188.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good number. Because I think the total GLP-1 users prior to that were about 225, somewhere around that, back in June when we looked at the data. So they,
And was that both for diabetic and
it
weight
was
loss?
both.
And wow. So
That's why that's why it was forecasting to be almost $4 million. And they were in no program. They were just users of the drug.
but we have 188 that is either Medallis or Digby, or we're saying there's 188 in Digby.
Just in Digby. That's
Wow. That's great.
Yep. And then again, they've got some messaging that they shared with us, but I'll just send that to you so you can review it on your own time. And then the next area is something that you asked the question, Jenny, about what types of programs that the Health Insurance Committee will look at. This is actually one of them that we brought up before about the Strive application. Instead of going through the detail with the board, I think this is a better kind of a discussion with that Health Insurance Committee, because it has to do with kind of technology and functionality at the member level, and getting their feedback on it, we think would be very, very helpful. And instead of going through all this detail, today, because we're not making a decision, but it's an overview of something we shared before we think could be, an asset and a resource. One of the things that they do that will be part of the discussion that they can look at is, having a single sign-on with API integrations, and it's really just taking an app and integrating all of our services into one location. And so if you do create a single sign-on, then literally you're connected to whether it's Blue Cross, E&I, Digby. So a member literally can go onto their one app, functionality and get access to the programs of NDPHIT. So we'll probably pass this along to the Health Insurance Committee to take a look at for something into the future. The next thing is, you already covered the standardization, so I won't belabor that point. But there is a topic here dealing with something that we just dealt with, is just for the board to be aware of. And that is, we were notified about the 15th of October by Blue Cross Blue Shield that there was some uncertainty whether this sanction benefit that they have for pharmacy that they've administered for several years now was not compliant for the CMS. So if you remember, we've covered this before when we changed the GLP-1 program, but you have the essential health benefit requirements. Remember, there's the 10 requirements of essential health benefits required by CMS. And if you remember, we changed our plan to Utah's to avoid the mandate in North Dakota. But one of the things that's all part of the standard mandate is that you have to cover prescription drugs as a standard benefit. Well, the minute where potentially the risk came to us, because the risk is not with Blue Cross, it's with the employer or the plan sponsor. We are the plan sponsor because we're the trust. And where it got a little bit uncomfortable, if you would, is because if we were out of compliant, the fines or the penalties are significant, into the millions of dollars. And so when they gave us notice of this, then obviously we had to get together and we shared this with Jenny. We thought it would be a good idea to get outside counsel, so we engaged Stinson into the analysis. They confirmed that if if it's found to be non-compliant, that the trust could be subject to penalties. We also, at the same time, were, in discussion with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and because we brought it to their attention of, detrimental reliance. In other words, you're the plan even though you're not the plan sponsor, you've advised employers what to do and could have a function of detrimental reliance, as if we are potentially subject to any penalties. And of course, I think that got their attention, and so they sought outside counsel. We had a call with them, I think it was last week, where they researched it and worked on it for probably at least 2 weeks. Finally got back to us and said, we feel confident based on our outside counsel that we are in compliance. However, to be safe, you could follow the advice to make that 50% sanction at 50% co-insurance, which really means that if the way it's done right now, if you have that 50% sanction applied to a pharmacy that's in that category, it does not apply to the out-of-pocket. So what we had Blue Cross do is we said, okay, you need to tell us what our exposure would be if we now have to cover those claims. And the result was that they came back and said it's approximately $150,000 if we have to cover now that those claims exposures back into our plan costs. So we made the recommendation that should be our plan change to make it a 50% co-insurance, and it applies to the out-of-pocket max, so that if we are ever audited by the Department of Labor, as soon as we found out about and be notified, we took action and followed the advice of both counsel as well as Blue Cross, that this was probably the appropriate way to make sure that if there was any concern about it being non-compliant, that it would be compliant now. So effective January 1st, I think even October pool too, Stephanie, you can confirm that, but I think October as well as January were all moved to a 50% co-insurance sharing, and subject to the out-of-pocket max instead of the 50% sanction not subjected to the out-of-pocket max. And it is an exposure potentially based on the usage of the historical drugs of approximately $150,000.
Yes, we did move all groups under the NDPHIT October pool and the January pool to 50% co-insurance effective January 1st.
And
And
then
I
just
know-
to
go ahead.
confirm, Randy, just to confirm, because we were
Yeah.
proactive in moving forward once we found out from Blue Cross Blue Shield that our potential non-compliance, because we were, proactive, we didn't wait, we're moving forward and making those changes, the likelihood of penalties for our trust is minimal.
Minimized.
Correct? Yes.
Yes, it's minimized significantly because we took action when we knew, or when we were notified, and sought all the kind of the appropriate venues for recommendations to make sure. So it's interesting because Blue Cross has many potentially, I think, other groups that have not made that change, but that's their decision. Each of those other groups, we just feel that the prudent thing to do is to make the change that was made.
Well, and I also just wanted to reassure the board that when we did find out about this potential issue, we really jumped on it to make sure that we were, doing everything that we could to come back in compliance and reduce our risk as much as possible. And I think by showing our due diligence, it definitely paid off, in my opinion. So I do appreciate all the work that you all did, because I know this was kind of a stop everything and move forward to make sure we get everyone in compliance, and even having to go back to the October pools and state there's going to be a change come January 1st. But I think the changes that we made definitely put us in a better standing as far as risk assessment in this area. So thank you for all of your guys' work in that area. So
yeah, and I think you're right. And the reason it was easier for the groups probably in that communication is that it didn't negatively impact any member. And it made it easier to make the change. The other thing that should be looked at by the Health Insurance Committee is this last bullet item is the net results initiative that Blue Cross is putting forth for 2026, which really, I think their effort to have this whole 50% sanction was the idea that they didn't have a closed formulary. Their competitors in the market, like Health Partners and United Healthcare, do have closed formularies, and it does have potentially significant pharmacy savings. So Blue Cross is moving their entire book to net results, which is a closed formulary program in 2026. So we will want to make that as part of that. I think again is one of those discussion items with the Health Insurance Committee to review and be aware of what that means, and so that we can communicate it if that's what the decision is to move forward. I think in fact they're going to require it, Blue Cross, for 2026. The last item that I had was, and this is just give you some, when you're on I just put examples of what the EHB requirements are in these pharmacy categories, just to give some context to it. The last area was an area you touched on, Jenny, which is the, any teeth that we may have. One thing that when we've been reviewing I reviewed the PERS program because we had an employer that was making a change, moving away from PERS. And one of the things that was prevalent in their agreement is that effectively the employer becomes responsible for any run-out claim liability if they leave PERS. And as a matter of kind of standard practice, I think Cole referred to this, it probably is a good idea, even beyond these penalty considerations in the Health Insurance Committee review, it may be a good idea to actually just update our participation agreement we already have this language right here. So it's members that elect to leave the trust following their 1-year notice will be, this is actually, I should say, this is the area that I was gonna, make as a recommendation. And that is if they give the trust the notice to leave with their 1-year required notice, will be billed all outstanding claims and related fixed claims administration cost as a terminal liability expense until such claims and related carrier claims administration expenses have been satisfied. Why that's important is if someone leaves, if we're no longer collecting premium, but we are responsible for those claims, the trust has to pay them. As a matter of standard practice to even mirror what PERS does, they require the same language if someone leaves PERS. That's different than the deposit. So we keep the deposit still in its own category, which means that deposit is used for rebates. This really hasn't changed, except that I added one other line in that is any other governmental actuarial plan compliance related funding requirements that the Board of Trustees can decide how to use this deposit, including a premium holiday like we talked about earlier. But it's just something, and I know this, however you want to handle it, Jenny, but I just thought it would be something we should put forward as a matter that's consistent with what other entities do when they leave trust programs, make that responsibility. It does add an additional little bit of teeth because not only could you forfeit your deposit, but you still, no matter what, you're responsible to pay your claims.
Did you state when you compared our plan with PERS, they also have a 1-year required notice, or is it a biennium?
Theirs is actually, you have to be in their program. It's a little bit different, a minimum of 5 years, okay? But if you leave before the 5 years, if your loss ratio is greater than 100, you have to pay those claims plus your run out.
Wow. Okay.
So Randy, in this sense, then, is it different for a member that gives a 1-year notice versus one that tries to say, well, we're out? without it, it doesn't really make a difference then, does it? Or does it?
Yeah, so if you give a 1 year notice, no matter what, you still have to pay. The objective is, if you decide to leave ever, you have to pay your run out claims. Okay. Plus, your deposit still may be withheld for these purposes here. So in the prior one, we had it to pay run out claims for your deposit, but I think those should be mutually exclusive things.
I still don't see where it holds you to the 1 year notice then.
Yeah, because the way this reads, it says following their 1 year required notice. It doesn't speak at all to if you do not provide 1 year's
Right.
notice. So there may need to be just a slight adjustment.
Slight adjustment. Good point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. But
The other thing that I'm not concerned with, but what is the purpose of them providing a 1 year notice? If the same penalty applies, whether they provide a 1 year notice or they don't,
yeah,
it still applies, the penalty or what they need to pay still applies. So I don't know
So there's no incentive to give a
to
1 year.
give a year notice, right?
Yeah.
So it's something I think the committee can discuss and try to figure out what would be appropriate.
Yep.
Mhm. Appreciate you putting together some at least some initial thoughts on how we can move forward in this for our participation agreement. I do agree, once we do have an approved verbiage to add this, I think all participant agreements should be redone and
Yep.
signed by all of our groups. Okay. Randy, anything else?
No, I'm sorry. It probably took more than my time, but
No, that's okay. It was good information. Nora, are you ready to do the financial overview?
I am.
All right.
Do I need to share my screen, or does everybody have the copy of the financials in front of you? I'm just going to bank on everybody having the copy that Brenna sent you. I'll make it quick. We don't have a lot of time before we're scheduled to be done, but first sheet is the balance sheet. Obviously, our main things that we have in our assets are our cash and CDs. Again, we do break out the deposit cash, but it's all in one pool. As you can see, our cash has increased from last year at the same time to almost just under 10.8 million. Cash wise, things have been going well. Better returns now that we've been investing in, the rates are better. And when they went and switched to First International, and also getting some of that income off of those CDs has been extremely beneficial while those rates were nice and high. So you can see that makes up the bulk of our assets. We're very liquid. Our liabilities are our accounts payable. That's always basically the lag that we have in the claims that we get from Blue Cross Blue Shield that are first paid in the following months. And then we are leaving the IBNR currently at that 3.5, as Randy had kind of discussed. The same thing that they had found in the Taylor Walker analysis, that was an appropriate place to be at for an IBNR. Again, we're almost at the end of another year, which seems crazy, but we will be having an actuary do the IBNR assessment again this winter, springtime and stuff to see where the evaluation of that is at. This year has been our slower year for actually adding groups, which is good. Slowing down, we've got some groups in there and stuff. So I wouldn't imagine to have as big as swings as we have in the past, just because we're not bringing on as many employees and stuff for those liabilities. So I expect it to start being a little bit more consistent. But as you can see on the bottom, 7.6 million in membership equity. So our operating surplus is starting to catch up to our membership deposits, which is always good to see. So right now it's continuing to build and getting to a nice place of, still having plenty in there to be able to pay off our claims and continue allowing this trust to grow as needed. On the income statement detail on the next page, again, I have added more columns over the last few months and shows this October, last year's October, year to date this year compared to year to date last year, just so we can kind of get a feel of, how things are looking in comparison to last year at the same time. And for October, it's been very consistent as far as it's, a slight increase in, our earned premium and stuff coming in. Obviously due to some of the new groups that came in, but we didn't have a whole lot of those. And then the rate increases, the large October rate increases obviously have only been in there the 1 month, so, and not real large, but compared to some of the past years of being stable. But losses have actually remained fairly consistent as far as the dollar amount, but since we're bringing in more premium, the percentage is a little less. As you can see, going from 97% loss ratio last year to 93%, it's actually a fairly, big swing as far as a percentage wise when you look at the amount of net earnings going to our bottom line. This year, we're just under 2.6 million year to date going towards our bottom line, increasing it. Last year, we were at about 550,000. So definitely been a more positive year, moving in that positive direction, things of that nature, but things have overall been remaining very stable and continuing to grow financially to put the trust in a good place. But overall, I would say 2.6 million year to date for net earnings going towards that equity is definitely a good place to be. And I know I went through that fast, but does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Nora? All right. Thank you, Nora. Well, the last agenda item, I'm actually excited. It's 4:27 and I think we were supposed to be done at 4:30. So we're going to make it on time, Brenna. I'm excited. The next NDPHIT board meeting will be in January. And I should have the date in front of me, but I don't. Brenna, do you have that date? Or do we have it? I know we had our board meeting scheduled through 24, but I'm trying to remember if we had 25 dates put together yet.
I'm looking 1 second.
I don't. Is it? I'm not seeing anything in my calendar for January, so we may need to send out a.
Yes, it's January 28th. I'm sorry. I don't think I sent that out yet. Did you hear that? January 28th.
28th? 28?
Yep.
Is that in person or online?
That one's on Zoom. We have a March one in person that we've never gotten to any year. Because it always storms in March, but we're gonna still try. I'll send out those invites for the new year. I must have stopped at the end of 2024.
And is that going to be a 3 o'clock meeting?
Yep.
Okay, I may be doing that at your office, Brenna, because I'm going to be in Fargo for our county engineers conference.
Okay.
So yes, I will be driving in on Tuesday. So I'll make sure to be there and I'll be at your office.
Welcome here.
So I apologize for interrupting. We had talked about doing an early renewal for these groups because it's a transition year where they're going to be doing negotiations. Yeah, and so we had talked about doing a renewal presentation at the end of February or the first to include this information with their negotiations. Is that?
Steph, could you, I apologize, but the first portion when you were speaking, your microphone cut out and we weren't able to hear what you said.
Okay, so we had talked about presenting the renewal for the schools earlier, like the end of February or the first part of March, in order to give the schools enough time for their negotiations for this year.
Okay.
So are you saying that there's?
So can we do a board meeting at the end of February or the first part of March?
Oh, you're saying to be able to
move up to March
present the renewal, yes. At the end of February or the first week of March.
I can send out like a survey to see a few dates if they're available in the beginning of March. Let me look at what schools have going on and I can just try to figure out a new date by email. Will that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think crossover is the first part of March as well. So even if we could, if it's an in-person to be able to do it on those dates, that would be helpful too.
Okay.
But then again, I won't be chairing in January because Mike will be taking over, so maybe it's not as critical. Okay.
Just an
Sorry, Mike.
update-
Yeah.
An update on the election. I don't know if you guys should have gotten an email to vote. So that's due by Friday. If you haven't. So, okay.
All right. Any other business for the NDPHIT board? All right. Well, with that, I adjourn. I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And if I don't see you before the end of the year, we'll see you in 2025. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, all.
Hey, Angie,
Yeah.
I know you're still on. Can I like call
Hold
you
on one
or
second.
do you? Oh.
You're live. You're live.